And I think that, it's a double-edged sword. We live in an age where more information is available than ever before, and it's this great blessing, and it's something that we take for granted, but at the same time, our culture has great breadth in terms of, we have so much available, but it doesn't have great depth. It doesn't, people barely scratch the surface now. And those are trade-offs that are just inevitable. In this kind of imperfect world, it's hard to have, both. You have to sometimes have one and not the other. And so, unfortunately, our politics will reflect that, and because it reflects our human nature and the world we live in right now.
Right, and you talked about impatience, and that's a good point right there. Is because we want results quickly. The term patience is a virtue, and that doesn't really apply to us. We want immediate results, and if we don't get those results immediately, we become dissatisfied. And I see that as a way that affects our culture from a political viewpoint. I want to talk about these two situations. When you talked about impatience during the war, there was the thought and the notion that democracy does not happen overnight. This was the Bush administration's focus on democracy and spreading freedom abroad. And when the casualties start mounting up, and when things overseas in the war zones were looking bleak and not looking pretty, the American people began to get dissatisfied. And there was the notion that, hey, you got to be patient. This takes time. And of course, the civil rights movement didn't happen overnight. America, we didn't get our independence from Great Britain overnight. And then let's go to the current Obama administration. And, their notion is, hey, to get the economy turned around, it's not going to happen overnight. And give us time, patience. How does our culture adapt to these notions in politics of being patient, or is that just a political ploy?
Yeah, well, I think that when politicians say that, it's interesting because a lot of those politicians who say that when they're in office were saying different things prior, before they were in office. Right. And then, of course, when they go into office, it's in their self-interest to, of course, preach patience. But unfortunately, I think it speaks to a broader problem in our society because it's less that specific issue and more that's just the way we are. I mean, as Americans, well, not just as Americans, but I think just our generation in general. Since we want results, and even back during the founding of this country, there were a lot of the same kind of things. People did get impatient about the Revolutionary War too, and people got impatient during the Civil War. I mean, both wars were hard fought, and for a long time it was not inevitable. And so there were a lot of the same kind of dynamics that were going on. In some ways we've changed, in some ways we haven't. And main way we've changed is that people are just more impatient, and they're just used to self-gratification. And I think that's something that, a politician might say here and there, but, how do you teach an entire generation to be more patient? How do you do it? It's not something that, again, it's funny. I think teaching patience requires patience in and of itself.
That's true.
Right. There's no quick fix to that, and I think it's something each generation has to work at. You were talking about the war specifically and how people, let's just talk about either Afghanistan or Iraq, let's say Iraq, and people were immediately, saying, oh, the mission's a failure, and just weeks into the war. I also think another way to show how I think narrow-minded I think, our generation can be is that we're often defined by the things that immediately happened before. And that's why I think teaching history is so important and seeing kind of the bigger picture, because we went to college and we were taught and raised by people that grew up during Vietnam. And so Vietnam is like the defining template of anything that happens in our, any kind of military action the United States pursues. And unfortunately, that's the war that everyone sees. Not everyone, but, our culture today has, a lot of our leaders came of age during that time. I mean, you remember 2004, Vietnam was still an issue. You remember with John Kerry and the
right.
Swift boat
the
and all
Swift
that,
boats,
and even,
right.
John McCain, and even 2008, it's still with us. And unfortunately, people are very much about, what happened to me, what happened in my lifetime, and that defines everything that they view. And in one way, it's understandable, but in another way, it's kind of narrow-minded because they're not seeing, well, yeah, America did suffer through a terrible conflict in Vietnam and made mistakes, but at the same time, look at the things America's done,
Richard,
throughout its history.
I hate to cut
liberating countries left and right.
I hate to cut you off, but we got a commercial break. Stay tuned. Major points of D minor. We return after these messages.
Talk Radio 1380, WNRR AM North Augusta. Streaming live at WNRR1380.com, where news radio rocks.
I'm Lindsay Helton with the Georgia News Network. Governor Nathan Deal signing House Bill 87 into law. He says the bill will protect employers and taxpayers.
What this bill does is to protect employers by providing them with a practical mechanism to ensure that they are hiring only those who are eligible for employment.
It gives police more powers to check a suspect's immigration status and requires employers to use E-Verify to check the legal status of their new hires. Several groups are speaking out against the new immigration law. Jerry Gonzalez is with the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials.
Well, fundamentally, what this is going to do is anybody that looks or sounds foreign is going to be subjected to harassment by police officers.
Gonzalez says efforts are already underway to file lawsuits to block the law, and there are plans to call for boycotts. Meanwhile, Governor Nathan Deal is planning a trip to Europe in hopes of creating more jobs here in Georgia.
In his first foreign trip since taking office, Governor Deal's main goal, build relationships that will bring jobs to Georgia. The delegation from Georgia will call on companies that already do business in the state to thank them and to let them know Georgia is interested if they want to expand. Jay Cosby, 640 WGST News.
The Vidalia onion season is in full swing in South Georgia, and state agriculture department officials say they're cracking down on farmers who are selling imposter onions that they claim to be Vidalias. State Agriculture Commissioner Gary Black says some farmers try to beat the system.
There are always those along the way. There have been those in the past that try to test the system, and then we swiftly address those.
Black says the Vidalia brand is one of the strongest in the marketplace. With the Georgia News Network, I'm Lindsay Helton.
When did insurance companies start emailing handshakes? Who decided you can't have good rates and good coverage? If you're questioning your insurance options, get real answers from a real person with a Farm Bureau Insurance Total Needs Evaluation. It's simple, quick, and tailored just for you. Get real auto, home, life, health, and banking. Get Farm Bureau Insurance. Georgia Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company, Georgia Farm Bureau Casualty Insurance Company, Southern Farm Bureau Life Insurance Company, Jackson, Mississippi.
If you know someone with a developmental disability who may be experiencing a behavior-related crisis, Georgia has a new mobile service that can help. If a person has documented evidence of an intellectual or developmental disability and meets the criteria detailed at www.ddcrisis.com, please call the Georgia Crisis Response System at 1-800-715-4225. Access to the service is available 24/7. Currently not available in all Georgia areas, but coming soon.
The look on your It can never explain your heart and the touch of my lips. It can never tell you my thoughts, and you want me to change, but I can't get used to all you want me to be in. I just can't pretend to be anyone else, 'cause it's not really me. This is my world. This is who I am.
And welcome back to Major Points with D Minor. Returning with This Is My World by Darius Rucker. And we're having a conversation about politics and culture and how they affect each other and they intertwine. And our special guest today is Richard Lim, recent graduate of Syracuse University, former employer with the White House and the Department of Labor. And Richard, if you don't mind telling us, what were your duties with those federal agencies?
Oh, yeah, well, you know, I had a ton of duties. When you're kind of at that age and you're political, you just kind of go where they want you to go. And so when I was with the Labor Department, in both cases, it was an honor to serve. And I at the Labor Department, I worked at Congressional Affairs for a little bit, which was a great experience, kind of seeing the interaction between the executive and the legislative branch. And then when I was at the Labor Department, I also worked for the Chief Financial Officer. And I was mentored by him, and I got to see kind of the financial accounting side of the government. And then after that, at the White House, I was at the Office of Correspondence, and I actually worked on the staff gifts of the White House. So I did the gifts of everybody from, you know, Karl Rove, and worked a little bit on the president's gifts, all the way down to, you know, staffers like myself. So it was a great opportunity.
And I interned in the Office of Presidential Correspondence.
Yes, I remember.
Nice office, and it had that family atmosphere. You know, everybody treated each other like family, and man, those are the good old days. Such good memories. Richard, you know, when I was growing up, I was used to people announcing their candidacy at certain locations. For example, John Edwards announced his candidacy for president one year in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina victims, I believe. And, you know, politicians were all concerned about certain locations and, you know, having the certain crowds there. But culture has changed, and we talked about, you know, technology. Now people are getting the word out via Facebook and via Twitter. And now Washington, as you know, are trying to adapt to this method. You know, many members of Congress and senators and even the White House has a Twitter account and a Facebook page. And you just look back at just a short amount of years that technology has pretty much dominated politics. What do you think this speaks of in terms of our culture?